have that take place, because that's the only way they can win this. And of course, the United States government, the Biden administration, doesn't want anything to do with that, because it would potentially be disastrous for their election chances, the Harris election chances in November. So you're seeing all these tensions that are just been exasperated and blown open. And now, of course, if this is not the first stages of the war that we've been anticipating between Hezbollah and Israel for a year now, I'm not sure what those opening stages are going to look like, because these last few days have been pretty intense.
How did you find the outcome on the part of, we had Nasrallah talking about the attacks, and how did you find his speech and the way he was responding to the attacks on the part of Israelis? Do you think they're backing down, they're finding their strategy, they're just thinking on how to respond, or they know what they're gonna do?
Well, in terms of Nasrallah's speech, he made it clear that this was there would be retaliation, that this is only going to further unify the Lebanese people. I think it only further unifies people around the world. I mean, certainly, we talk about the Turks a lot here, and certainly I know this had to move the Turks to another level. The Turks have to be considering, okay, as the Turks try to and the Syrians come to some degrees of rapprochement, right? As they're trying to heal what occurred over the last, almost 15 years now. You have this issue with Israel. First, it was the genocide in Gaza. Then, of course, always what's happening in the West Bank. But now with Lebanon. And so, it's just not how the Lebanese and Hezbollah, but also the Lebanese in general, are going to respond, but how others are going to respond. And so why aren't the Turks now considering other options? I don't think we're going to see Turkish F-16s over Beirut or the Bekaa Valley or anything like that. But certainly this idea of the Turks being funneling weapons and support to Hezbollah I think that's a foregone conclusion at this point. It's just not how Hezbollah reacted. Also, too, you see the Lebanese government, Lebanese government is really, I guess, a caretaker government is the right way to describe it. It's a shell. There's nothing really there. But their reaction and the unity it could bring among the Lebanese people, so the consequences of this strategically are unsound for Israel. How does this further enable Israel's security, its stability, its safety? It doesn't. And Netanyahu over the weekend also made a big to-do right before these attacks about the fourth goal of our operations now against Hamas are to bring our people back to their homes in northern Israel. So he explicitly and clearly links Gaza to Lebanon. And then as well, you see throughout Israel, many don't agree with this, but many do, this idea of the necessity of an invasion of Lebanon for the third time, right? For the third time in 40 years, essentially. Maybe third time's a charm for the Israelis. Who knows, right? I mean, why they think that, I can't tell you. But this idea that we need to push into Lebanon for security reasons, right? And certainly if you're on the militarist security side of Netanyahu's coalition, as well as those who are not in his coalition, because many of them are in lockstep. They're just not as obscene as Netanyahu and his governing coalition are. So if you're on the militarist side of that equation, the militant nationalists, if you will, this idea of going into Lebanon to get that buffer, right? Push Hezbollah back north above the Litani River, give us that buffer. Okay, this is appealing to you. This makes sense to you. It makes sense on a map. So many of these military mindset. Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator called them machine men, right? Machine men with machine minds and machine hearts, brutes, he called them. You look at those in Israel who aren't of the religious caste, but of this militarist caste. That's who these people are. And of course, for the religious side of this, for the settler side of it, for the Zionist Greater Israel side of it, this idea of expanding into Lebanon, has always been a part of their agenda. So here's now your chance. So now the fruits of October 7th are really starting to multiply. You had your ability to ethnically cleanse Gaza, which was further reinforced because, again, over the weekend, busy weekend with statements from Netanyahu, which is not an accident with the UN General Assembly coming up, as well as with the UN General Assembly's actions last week. And I think, of course, that UN General Assembly resolution that vast majority of the world voted for, only 12 nations stood with the U.S. and Israel against that resolution, that UN General Assembly resolution that called for Israel to end its occupation of Palestine, and also called on member states to sanction, blockade, embargo Israel. I think that plays into the use of this pager walkie-talkie attack in Lebanon, and then this seeing through of the steps needed to get into this war with Lebanon. But what you also heard Netanyahu say this weekend, supposedly at a staff meeting at a conference, was that this idea, what they call the generals plan, because came up by a couple or two or three retired generals, of ethnically cleansing the north of Gaza, pushing the Palestinians south in the Netzarim corridor. So you're starting to see, okay, now you've got the big arrows coming out. Now you're starting to see their strategic goals coming out. What's Israel want to try and accomplish in the next 2 or 3 months? We're barely a month away from the American elections. So what do they want to try and accomplish before the elections? What do they want to lock in place by the time the elections are over? What do they want to have become a fait accompli by the time the next president is sworn in? And I think that might be fairly meaningless, because with Harris or Trump, they're getting the same, thing. So, but, this idea of seeing this fourth part of the war against Hamas, as they would call it, now being this return of settlers to the north of Israel, well, that then means that we have to do something to allow that to happen. And that means not just bombing Hezbollah, not just terrorizing the Lebanese population, but also as well putting our troops in the ground that have this buffer zone. And then where that goes, how far they've gamed that out, how much they've thought about the second, third, fourth steps involved in that process, or the order of effects. Who knows? But it seems, I think we're a little more clearer today than when we talked 2 weeks ago about what is Israel going to do. What is the Netanyahu? What are their next clear moves? I mean, we know the tit for tat with Lebanon. We know the continuing genocide in Gaza. We know continuing to turn the screw on the Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But what are those big arrows? Where are they trying to go with this? And I think we've seen that. And of course, the ultimate goal is to get the U.S. to come in on their side when the war with Lebanon, ultimately a war with Iran, something again that the White House is terrified of, because it would, just for the fact that it could spike oil prices to the point that we're paying $7 or $8 gallon gasoline here in the U.S. and then Harris loses. So in this time, while